It's complicated. Life is complicated. I'm complicated. Zen is certainly complicated. It all has history. It all has a past, present in the present, and that goes to shape the future. So Zen's complicated. The Atonement Gatha, which is what I'm going to talk about this evening. Atonement, or At-One-Ment. I say it often, but it's important. Atonement does actually mean at-one-ment, making one, making whole, bringing together. So there's this little 4-line gatha in our version. Other versions are available. Many other versions are available. All are ancient harmful actions, arisen from beginningless greed, anger and delusion, born of our body, speech and mind. We atone for them now. So actually, this is the first important part of its history. It doesn't stand alone. It's not something we can nominally at least take right back to the birth of Buddhism with Shakyamuni. It's much more directly connected with a very specific source, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Buddhavatamsaka Sutra, known in English as the Flower Ornament or Flower Garland Sutra. One of the most influential sutras in the whole of Western Buddhism, Eastern Buddhism, Asian Buddhism, central to the Tibetan tradition, certainly central to all the Chinese schools, and to chant and Zen. The Huayan school in China, hugely influential, and again influences Chan becomes Zen in Japan. So these are key texts of Mahayana Buddhism, so they're about maybe 1500, maybe a few more than that, years old. As we have it, the sutra is, well, there's extant versions in Chinese, there's an extant version in Tibetan. Both of those were translated from Sanskrit. We have bits of the Sanskrit original, and then some of the Chinese was translated back. I think it was the Chinese translated back into Sanskrit. So it's a complicated and many-faceted text. It's huge. This is the standard translation still, 1,400 plus pages. It's an immense, has to be said. I mean, it's an immense work of spiritual literature. Several hundred of these pages are pages of lists. It's complicated. And right at the very end of the last book, which is itself a tremendous journey of spiritual enlightenment, it's about 400 pages in this translation, we get Samantabhadra's vow. We get the great vow of the Buddha, perfectly good, or we can translate it loads of different ways. Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva, the enlightenment being, who is this kind of presence over the whole narrative, but really comes to figure just at the end here. And this vow, as I say, it crops up in the Tibetan tradition, very strong there. It crops up so much across the whole of Chinese Buddhism, and specifically in Zen. And this, the fourth of, I think, normally seen as the 10 vows that Samantabhadra offers at the conclusion of this text, all the wonderful things he's going to do, offer flowers to Buddhas, the works. But during this we get this verse of atonement, or verse of repentance. And this is from Cleary's translation. Whatever evil I may commit under the sway of passion, hatred or folly, bodily, verbally or mentally, I confess it all. Sounds actually quite different from ours, doesn't it? And as I say, there are many different versions available. Ours is a kind of translation of the standard Zen form, which the nuances of we can translate in so many ways, and we actually fiddle a bit with this to try to make a version which has some kind of resonance, some kind of meaning for our practice in terms of continuity and in terms of our practice as we manifest it today, here. So this vow of Samantabhadra is one of the key statements of the Bodhisattva path. And we often, if we think of the Bodhisattva path, we think about the four great vows about saving or freeing all beings, about ending or transforming delusions, about entering the Buddha way. And so we can see these 10 vows of Samantabhadra in relationship to those 4 vows which we chant on a regular basis. We can talk this through in many ways, but why chant? Why chant at all? Why do we take these little nuggets of ancient texts and go, yes, important aspect of our practice? I think in terms both as an affirmation of what this practice is about and of our aspiration as practitioners of Zen, practitioners in relationship to Buddhism, whether we see ourselves as Buddhists or not. There's that connection. To say this, basically we, in the sense of the wider Zen community, have been chanting this for 1500 years now. And when we chant together, we sit alongside all of those in the great Sangha, all of those in their individual Sanghas, or sat alone. We sit with them and we chant with them. We make this connection real. And so this is a connection back through time. But because we're doing what they've done, because we're sat as they were sat, because we say the words that they say, with our breath, we make the air vibrate in the same way. And this is the reason why the version that we use includes both the Sino-Japanese, so that's the weird Japanese fake Chinese dialect which Japanese traditionally chant in, and we chant the English for sound, for resonance, for meaning, and to stress in both the dimension of meaning and the dimension of form itself, continuity. We remake this gatha, we reaffirm this gatha. So if at one level it's about bringing us together, as with our metta, making whole practice that we were doing last week, if at one level it's about bringing ourselves whole, it's also about bringing the Sangha whole, bringing the tradition whole, that we make all of this at one through our activity of chanting. But because every breath is unique, every breath is different, it's obviously a practice of impermanence as well. If I'm stressing the repetition, every repetition is different. And if our affirmation, if our aspiration is going to be in any way genuine, we remake. We remake this practice every time we chant, and we as a Sangha remake this practice of At-One-Ment in a way which is however minimally or however maximally ours. And this is important because no continuation that isn't a remaking. And so it's not a question of finding some original meaning. It's not a question of practicing in exactly the same way that anybody from any point along this tradition would recognise, but in a practice that makes sense as part of this tradition, as a particular development. Maybe the word evolution is too strong, but makes sense as part of this line, this chain of chants, this chain of sanghas. In a sense, because actually begin to look at it, none of the words we're using are entirely straightforward or entirely clear in their meaning. To chant it is also implicitly to pose a question. It's not like we're trying to find the right meaning or the true meaning here, because there is no simple, single, true meaning. We're trying to engage with this field of making whole in whatever way we can. So what kind of questions is this asking? Well, let's have a look at some of the words. All our ancient harmful actions. Okay, let's begin with our. We chant our. We have actually talked about this. Obviously, mostly these Chinese chants have no pronouns, they have no cases, they have no grammar at all. But here, this is Samantabhadra's vow, so this is actually the Bodhisattva himself speaking. He speaks as all my, because in one sense we're chanting with him, but also because we're chanting, well, as we'll go on to talk about, because all of our actions are interconnected, all of our actions are actually interbeing. It's always seemed to me to make more sense to chant our here. So we chant with the Bodhisattva, if we want to go in that direction. We chant with our Sangha, and I very much want us to think in that direction. But we also chant with all beings, because this is the process that we're all consciously or unconsciously engaged in, this making one. All our ancient harmful actions. And that ancient there suggests the continuity of time. And of course, traditionally, we take that as previous incarnations or previous births and a line extending back through time. But whether we want to think in terms of an individual rebirth, we are the product of the whole of our, rather than my, history in that sense. The history of our, well, peoples, cultures, engagements, mutual engagements over the whole time span of the existence of the world, really. Not just people, all beings, animals, plants, mountains, volcanoes, oceans, if we want to think in those terms. There is actually no limit to this interaction. And of course, action here is a translation of what we normally translate as karma. And why not just say karma? Well, why not? We could. Actually, maybe we'll change it one day, so we do. I don't know. But the reason that we say action in this sense is because we want to clean out some of those associations of karma, the directions that karma perhaps naturally tends to take us, whether that's in terms of fate or mysticism or the personal baggage that I carry or any of that. Karma means action. That's simply what it means. action and the consequences of that action. So everything I've done, everything we've done, everything we've done, we in the biggest sense, and of course this being, this body, this mind, this speech, arisen from beginningless greed, anger and delusion. And of course all of that we can translate differently again. And greed, brings a sense of grasping, doesn't it? You will even see that translated as desire. Arisen from beginningless desire, which then brings us right back. Well, if the aim of our practice, and this is really a pre-Mahayana idea, is just simply to stop the world, stop my existence, I want to get off, then all desire clearly is productive of negative action in this sense. It's keeping me here, keeping me existing. And in the traditional sense, life after life after life. But if in the Mahayana sense we want to take that, life is the game. Life is what we play. I don't want to get off. Then we can talk specifically, I think, of greed. When does desire become harmful? How do we tell the difference? Well, there's a question. It's one of the great questions of our practice. Anger, you'll often see it as hatred. Less dramatic, actually. In many ways, I think ill will is more accurate because it's got that really kind of, niggly, actually how many people do we hate at the end of the day? We get angry? Yeah. But we get a lot more ill will, and that is absolutely included in what it means. And we've talked about this before. The little snap, the bit of meanness, the whatever, it's all there. Arisen from beginningless greed, anger and delusion. Delusion, absolutely. Confusion about the nature of reality. And again, we'll often see this as ignorance, which in its way is fine, absolutely. But it's not a simple, it's certainly not a not knowing. It's not, if I'd read the manual, I'd understand how life works. It's much more not seeing, coming from the wrong direction, being confused about, having wrong ideas about, and how we project those on to the way that we experience the world, with the way that we react to the world. Delusion seems like a good fitting version of that. And again, if you look at the Chinese characters and you want to go and look them up and all their resonances, of course, all of these are translations. The Chinese is best versions of Sanskrit terms, and we're working in relation to both. Born of our body, speech and mind. And again, it's traditional division. Yeah, this body does stuff. That causes suffering to this body, suffering to many, many different beings. Why do I do these things? Well, there's a story. There's a story which is part of the history of the interrelationship of all beings. Same with these words. These words in themselves are action. These words exist in relation to thoughts. So the three modes of action: bodily action, speech, communicating through ideas, and the internal process itself. So we bring all these together. We bring them all together. What does that mean? Well, we've talked about this in a lot, isn't it? We talked about this in terms of dissociation and cutting things up and disconnecting things and not looking at things. And in fact, we could translate greed and anger as our turnings towards and our turnings away from. Okay, so what about delusion? What's our fundamental delusion? Well, our fundamental delusion is not experiencing the world as not separate, as both real and as empty, as not having fixed, separate essences. Again, we're into words again, aren't we? What does that mean? It means seeing, literally seeing, and then acting towards each other and different beings as if we were fundamentally separate. And that's our primary delusion, if you like, from which everything else really stems. So this little gatha, this little verse, is really, it reaches out into every aspect of the Bodhisattva path. And this way of understanding, which Mahayana Buddhism developed in relationship to things like the text of which the Heart Sutra is a part, the wisdom texts, perfect understanding or perfect wisdom, or however we want to translate that. On the one hand, on the other hand, the philosophy of Nagarjuna, but actually condensed down and presented here just as this vow. I bring all this together. I bring all of this together. And of course, with that, I bring the fundamental seeming paradox of the Bodhisattva path, which is, okay, if all of this is, at one level, empty, then why am I bothered? Or, if there is no Bodhisattva to save all beings, and no beings to save, and no saving to be done, what's the game? That, of course, is our misperception, our misunderstanding, because this is as real as it gets. But it's also not separate. It's not essences. And if we do begin to see, to experience this is not separate, then that paradox resolves. But what doesn't resolve altogether and what doesn't become entirely clear is the role of intention in this, because intention is not separate from everything else. And very often within Buddhism generally, you'll read about intention as, well, karma only functions in terms of intention, that it's only what I intend to do which generates what will be interpreted as good or bad karma. And yet, of course, we know that so much of our intention we're not aware of. Why? Well, partly we've dissociated from it. Obviously, it's the bits we don't look at. Partly we are the subject to complex forces. This is what it is to be alive. This is what it is to be embodied. This is what it is to be one of these weird speaking beings. Some stuff we know about, some stuff we don't know about. Which maybe comes back to the reason for not talking about karma, but talking about action instead, because we can't see cause and effect in terms of payback, whether that's, payback for something which some being did 10 millennia ago, or payback for what I did yesterday. It would be nice to think, if we could think in terms of some kind of cosmic scales of balance, but it's not that. It's more complicated. It's not some working out of cosmic justice. It's not about punishment. It's not about responsibility in that sense. It's certainly not about guilt. And I think our temptation, if we want to talk about it, our programming to relate everything back to guilt and the possibility, I'm being selfish, I'm so bad, and then we're into the story of self. Then we're into the the fantasy, then we're into the delusion. It's both more complex and much simpler than that. We're just these comings together. Back to Jocko's idea of the whirlpool in the river. Whatever detritus, whatever litter, whatever flotsam and jetsam get caught in our little whirlpool and flung out before we ourselves dissolve back into the river. It's the sense in which we are all part of the genocide that's going on in Palestine, but also the Holocaust from the previous century, which you can't think about the genocide without holding the two together. And of course, much, much more than that. We are all of this, but not in a sense to nail down guilt, punishment. No, it's causality. It's complicated, but we're part of it all. Which then raises the question, well, yeah, so what do I do? And that's, in a sense, the permanent question, isn't it? So some of this is about intention. Some of this is about unintention. Some of this is about what I choose not to look at. Some of this is about what I've never heard of. Maybe I go and find out about. So we can talk about two types of at-one-ment in a sense, because, well, it's traditional distinction in Zen itself between formal atonement, at-one-ment, and informal. And most of what I've been talking about so far is informal. It's experiencing our connection with the whole of reality and ourselves as a product of history. History in the widest possible sense. The accidents, the inevitabilities, the inheritance of being this being, everything from, being a biped with two eyes subject to the pull of gravity, through to what my parents did, through to what it is to grow up in this country in this time frame. History in the widest possible sense, in that sense. And the way that we bring all of that. And our basic practice of at-one-ment is our zazen, our simple sitting. Because in zazen, well, in one sense you can say we put all this down because we cease to act. And we cease to ponder in the sense that we normally do. And we cease to overthink. But actually, in another sense, it's not a putting down at all. It's an opening. It's an opening to whatever turns up for us and allows us to think this through, to work this through, for the processes to naturally process. So it's both a putting down and just an opening to. But then there's also the formal side of at-one-ment, which might be taking on board in a specific acknowledgement of what I have done, my intention, or my lack of intention, or my carelessness in doing that, and how I might intend to actually take responsibility for that, and what responsibility might mean in that sense. Coming back to not judgment, not guilt, not punishment, but connection and holding whole, and bringing together and making whole. And again, with the idea of karma, if we study that in Buddhism, we learn, and hopefully we remember, that it's not about fate. It's not about inevitability. That it's the opposite of that in a sense, but it's the connection of history in its widest sense, with the present and how that works for the future in terms of cause and effect. And how intention and freedom are not separate. And how this vow of atonement, at-one-ment, bringing together, is not separate from those vows, those four great vows of aspiration to save all beings, whatever that might mean. So we bring all of this together when we sit and we chant with who knows how many generations of other sanghas to try and make at-one-ment with all beings in this moment, in this period of Zazen. All our ancient harmful actions, arisen from beginningless greed, anger and delusion, born of our body, speech and mind. We atone for them now.